Hello, and welcome to another Cloud Podcast, a podcast designed to bring you stories from the smartest minds in IT, operations, and business, and learn how they're using cloud technology to improve business and the customer experience. All right, well, welcome to another Cloud Podcast. We're excited today because we get to talk about digital transformation, contact center, AI, what's new, and what's happening with the AI. And today we have Mike Myer from Quiq. And they are the next gen digital conversation software as a service company that we're working with, and would love to just introduce you, Mike, and get a little background on who you are and what you're doing.
Sure. Thanks for having me. My company, Quiq, we're focused on changing the way that consumers can interact with businesses. And what I mean by that is, if you think about how you get stuff done with family and friends, if you want to schedule a dinner or confirm an appointment, you probably send a text message. And so text messaging is the easiest way to get stuff done with your family and friends. And unfortunately, interactions with businesses these days aren't as easily done as a text message. And so you need to set aside 20 or 30 minutes to make a phone call and make sure you get through the IVR in the hold time, and then have enough time to interact with the agent afterwards. Or you send an email and maybe your problem will get resolved in a day or two. And so neither of those are the most efficient way to interact with a business, as it's been proven out, because people don't interact that way with family and friends. And so what we're about is modernizing the business to consumer interactions on text messaging.
I love it. And I love this topic. And Alex, really happy that I'm on this one. And Mike, to your point, yeah, I don't treat my families and friends text messages as tickets that I log into a CRM or Zendesk, and I resolved that one, so I don't have to respond to that one. Mm-hmm. Let's go back a little bit and talk a little bit about the origin story of Quiq. So tell us a little bit about how you started the company, the organization, and where you've come since then.
So throughout my career, I've spent a lot of time in some type of customer service or customer-facing software roles. And so I started my career way back when at AT&T Bell Labs, when that was a thing. And in the first part of my career, I actually worked on a ticketing system that interacted with business customers. And then later, I joined, essentially in the Internet 1.0 days, I joined a company that was called Right Now Technologies. And the Right Now had the idea that the way businesses and consumers interacted were going to be disrupted by the web. And so this almost sounds like silly at this point in time, because this is like a foregone conclusion. Like website and the whole customer interaction journey is completely changed by the web. And so we built the first SaaS platform for customer experience at Right Now, and served lots of large businesses, folks like Starbucks and Nike and SiriusXM back in the day. And from that journey, I learned really well what a large brand does to serve their customers at scale. And so the Right Now journey was also not only good for me, but it was a good outcome. We were eventually purchased by Oracle. The Right Now platform became Oracle Service Cloud. And afterwards, I spent a little bit of time in another startup in the AI machine learning space. But I always still had kind of like this gnawing vision in the back of my mind that like the system that we built in the Right Now era was based upon this antiquated phone and email channels that I didn't use in my personal lives. And so like, why couldn't I disrupt the contact center with asynchronous messaging? And so that's what I did in starting this business in 2015. So, it's kind of the culmination of a long journey in the customer service software space.
Yeah, what an interesting origin story, and just seeing like what you did and how Right Now got purchased by Oracle, and now it's Oracle Service Cloud. You mentioned something a second ago, and that was asynchronous digital conversation. And that's some of the words that we don't hear very often. Why don't you give us a brief kind of vocab background on some of these keywords that are in your world and what that means for the audience?
Sure. And I think that in a number of years, everybody's going to understand the difference between async and sync. And I'm actually starting to see more people in the industry. In fact, I've even seen some people whose titles are, they're the asynchronous communication channels, like they're the manager of asynchronous communications. So what is the difference between asynchronous and synchronous? So this sounds very techy, but the simple form is synchronous means the interaction is contiguous, like there's no breaks, it's start to finish one interaction. And that's what happens on a phone call. You call somebody, you start talking, you don't put the phone call on pause in the middle and go do something else. Like the phone call happens start to finish, so it's synchronous. Asynchronous means that there could be logical breaks in the middle of it, but overall the individual segments of that interaction, they all make up one total conversation. And so if you think about how you text with family and friends, like you might be send a text to a friend and they respond. You might be busy when they respond, like you're making lunch for the kids and you see the text come in and you're like, okay, I'll get done with that when I put food on the table. And then when the kids start eating, like you respond back again. So asynchronous in our world, basically, especially from the consumer's perspective, means that the consumer is free to control the cadence of the conversation. So the business always needs to be there. It's kind of like, would be rude if the business didn't respond for 30 minutes, but it's not rude if the consumer doesn't respond for 30 minutes. And so what we see in the communication style for an agent is an agent should respond in a couple minutes to a text message, but it's up to the customer to respond whenever they want. And sometimes the customer might not respond for a couple hours. Sometimes they might respond immediately. Sometimes they might not respond till the next day. And in all those cases, the conversation, if it's not logically resolved, should continue on as if there was no break in the middle of it. And this is kind of fundamentally different than everything else that occurs today in the contact center. Everything else is synchronous. And so it really changes the way that a professional contact center manager needs to staff and manage interactions, the type of people that you need to hire. Because if I'm a busy contact center agent in asynchronous messaging, that probably means that I've got, instead of one item underway, I've probably got like 5 or 7 simultaneous conversations underway. So I need to be like good at multitasking. And in addition to those 5 or 7 simultaneous conversations, I might have another 10 or 20 that I started earlier in the day, and the customer hasn't responded for a while, and so they went inactive. They're now in the parking lot, and when the customer does respond in the future, they need to come back alive, and we'll continue on as if there was no break in between. But during that break, I'm free to go and work on other conversations. And so this asynchronous thing is actually pretty important because it's really a different way of working and managing a contact center.
Yeah, and I love your example earlier of texting friends and family, and this is the way that we all think as humans. When I'm texting a bunch of people, I've got my, I open up my iPhone, I've got my messages, and I've got all these threads of conversations that have just been going on for years and years and years. I'm not just gonna like reply and say, okay, this conversation's ending, let's start a new one tomorrow. It just doesn't make any sense. So I love how you frame that out. Let's talk a little bit about, because we were talking about AI and automation, and a lot of the times people think, oh, that's just a chat bot, or that's just some sort of bot that's going to respond. But really what's such you guys different is the way that you guys handle things, and you guys use a term called conversational AI. And you guys didn't coin it, it's out there in the marketplace, but tell us a little bit about what is conversational AI and what are the potential use cases for businesses to use conversational AI?
Sure. So I think the Quiq platform is unique in regard to the fact that the platform is composed of 2 things. It's a conversational AI engine, and it's the next generation async contact center. And so in my earlier part of the description, I used the term conversation a bunch of times. And for us, a conversation is one interaction between a business and a consumer relating to one particular topic. But that conversation doesn't have to necessarily be with a human. It could also be with a bot. And a lot of times the conversation might actually start with conversational AI, be with a bot, and then later transition to a human. Or it could start with a human and transition to conversational AI to like collect feedback survey or survey feedback at the end of the conversation. So the term conversational AI is, in some ways, you can think of it as a chatbot, but I think when a lot of people think of chatbots, they think of keyword-driven, very simplistic, simple interactions, and that's not what we're designing here. What we're designing here are complex interactions that are data-driven. So when you come to the website, and if you've placed an order in the last 24 hours, the conversational AI assistant says, "Welcome back. Do you have a question about the order you placed yesterday?" And so that context-aware, conversational, being a smart assistant, not just being like a keyword bot that responds to the word order. And so that's what we think about conversational AI. And it's really important that conversational AI isn't just like a black hole where you route customers into and they're stuck inside of there. The agent experience needs to be tightly integrated so that if a customer asks the same question multiple times, or if they just say agent, or if they appear to be stuck, don't let them flounder around with the bot and be stuck like an infinite set of menus. Very quickly escalate them out to a human agent who can provide a backstop for the conversational AI. And so that's part of the platform. The fact that that next generation agent contact center is linked up to the conversational AI.
Yeah, I can see how important that is, because if you have this asynchronous conversation, you have a live agent, you have conversational AI, and it's all working together to make it a seamless experience for the customer. And I completely relate. I was on a web chat thing with Verizon trying to see about getting a new phone, I'm like, I was running out of time. It was taking forever and I needed to go. But I knew if I left, all the work that I had done would be lost. And so it makes complete sense that this asynchronous approach would be perfect. Put my conversation in a parking lot until I get back tomorrow, type of thing, right? And I think that makes complete sense. And I can see the use cases out there. What would you say? So what makes Quiq different, right? There's obviously competitors out there for conversational AI. Not sure as much about the asynchronous conversations, but what makes you guys different? How are you guys making a splash in the industry right now?
So let me highlight a couple of differences. So the first is there's a lot of traditional web chat and community, even some of the traditional telephony platforms have added like SMS, and they label that as digital messaging or even async. From the very beginning, we leveraged our background of building the Right Now system and understanding like what a large contact center needs to run at scale. We leveraged that background to rethink about how the new world of the next generation contact center is going to run in asynchronous. And so that's sending and receiving messages asynchronously, like that's the tip of the iceberg. There's all these other things involved. Like for instance, in a traditional contact center, if you were on the phone, AHT, average handle time, was like the key metric. Like I needed to get AHT down because then we'll need fewer agents. And we used AHT to figure out like how many agents we'd need in a particular period of time. And so in the new world of asynchronous, like AHT is a meaningless metric, because the time that a customer takes to respond is part of the AHT. And so like, how do you actually accurately measure like the agent involvement in a conversation and exclude the time that it takes for the customer to respond? And so there's a whole bunch of things where we just rethought the fundamental concepts of the contact center when we started from scratch to build from async. And so that's one way that we're unique and different. I talked earlier about how the conversations can seamlessly flow between both directions, between conversational AI and the next generation contact center. That's another way that we're unique and different. And I think the fact that we are able to have that tight linkage and move conversations easily from conversational AI to humans, I think you'll find a much more reasonable approach to applying conversational AI. And what you'll see from some pure play conversational AI vendors is they only have one hammer in the toolbox. And as a result, they try very hard to have that hammer hit all nails. And so there are some situations where conversational AI is fantastic. And like, for instance, if I'm a retailer and I have, retail these days, you have like shipping problems and you have supply availability problems. And both of those things are easily automated because I can go into my shipping system, I can look when an item's available, I can tell when something's going to be shipped, et cetera. And so that stuff can be automated. It's very transactional. But when it comes to maybe a question of like, I need some help because my feet are very wide and I've got a bunion, and will this pair of sandals actually fit over my bunion? That's probably not going to be handled by conversational AI. It's a very specific, like kind of obscure question. And if I'm just a conversational AI vendor, I'm probably going to like try to like make a bot to answer all kinds of crazy questions like that. And in our world, I think we're very balanced in our approach so that we're not trying to make our conversational AI fit every solution, because we've got the power of the agents in the contact center alongside the conversational AI.
Yeah, and one of the things that I love about Quiq is that you don't take the approach of let's just focus on one channel, one digital channel, like web chat, for example. You guys go across web chat, SMS, MMS. You have the ability to do a lot of social channels as well, like I believe Twitter and Facebook Messenger, and I believe Instagram direct message once WhatsApp. So it's really interesting that you're enabling contact centers to have more of a digital conversation outreach across multiple channels. And you touched on e-commerce, and I want to just bring this topic up a little bit, and we'll drill into it a little bit more. 10 years ago, a lot of companies were not considered online or web companies, but now the majority of companies out there are web-based. And now with the pandemic, and now with e-commerce migrating and moving to things like Uber Eats and Postmates and Facebook shops, consumers are interacting with brands and buying products, not only through traditional websites, but also through social media and other platforms as well. So now that we're all trying to figure out how to support our customers across those different e-commerce channels, what do you see as the next step for supporting those customers in those same channels? How do you build that out, and how do you frame that out for companies that are looking to support their customers for that?
It's an exciting time. I think that in the overall space of digital transformation with asynchronous messaging, we've talked about kind of conversational AI and agents, and most of that conversation that we've had so far was really focused probably more around a customer service journey. But that's not the only use case that conversations can be applied. There's a lot of conversations that happen in a purchase journey, like help me find a product, give me some advice, and then help me purchase. And so the term that comes to bear there is conversational commerce. And so, I think that everything we're talking about here is emerging technology. Asynchronous messaging applied to a customer service journey is, there's a good number of businesses that have implemented that, and there's a lot of momentum behind that. Conversational commerce is the next step. And so there's not as much awareness and not as much momentum behind it, although there is a ton of potential. And so what I mean and when I explain conversational commerce is, think about in the past, when you went to a physical store, you walked through the door and somebody came over to you and said, "Can I help you find something today?" And then you're like, "Oh, I'm looking for this." And you walked with the person to that spot on the shelf, and the person said, "We've got this, this, and this." And you looked at a couple items and you said, "Well, does this one do that?" And you have an interaction about the item. And then you're like, "Okay, I'll take it." you walk together to the cash register, and the associate rings you out, and you're on your way. So like there was a very helpful assistant that helped you through that shopping journey. And so the same type of assistance doesn't exist today on websites, because if you go to a website, it's a static experience. And it's up to you. If you have a question, maybe there's web chat, but it's probably not aware of what you're looking at. It's not like actually it didn't recommend the items that you're looking at for sure. And so when we talk about conversational commerce, we're talking about replacing that helpful associate that you would have had in the retail store with a digital persona that is able to like wisely recommend products, answer questions about the products that you're looking at, and then actually help you complete the purchase and take payment inside of the messaging conversation, not like send you to the website or something else, like actually in the message and conversation through text messages, make the payment.
That's really interesting. And it's like, obviously e-commerce is a huge piece for this conversational commerce. Where do you see, like, what's the adoption like for these companies? Because, you know, I'm an outdoors guy. I'll go to rei.com and look for things, or I'll go to another one called Moose Jaw, which is all outdoor stuff. And there's no one there to help, right? If I'm looking for something like skis or boots, there isn't a bot popping up saying, hey, do you have any questions on these? And I'd imagine I'll deviate a little bit. There was one company that I bought skis from, and their bot popped up. It wasn't a bot, it was a human. And I had questions on the skis, and he's a skier. He skis the skis, like, and he was there virtually to say, for based off what you're looking for, I'd recommend these. And I bought them. And I said, tell your boss that you got these skis from me because of that bot that you guys have, because otherwise I probably wouldn't have had a chance, or would have bought it from the website. So I imagine the challenge can be, well, how do we staff for experts in the contact center, and how much is that a limitation to, you know, to these companies that have people available for these conversations?
Well, first of all, kudos to the brand that you interacted and bought skis with, because they're probably in the top single-digit percentile of like actually offering a great digital customer experience. And to complete the conversational, because they're not, I wouldn't completely label them as conversational commerce yet, because when you bought the skis, you probably didn't actually do the purchase in the conversation. You probably went to the website after the conversation and did the purchase in a web form. So that's the final journey in terms of conversational commerce. But kudos to them. Coming back to your question of like how do you staff and you handle this? Well, there's a trade-off in terms of staffing. If I was selling luxury vehicles or jewelry, I might want to have every interaction go to a human, because the transaction value was so high that I wanted to have an advisor, a guide me through the purchase. If I'm selling a $20 item, it's fairly simple and doesn't require a whole bunch of advising to make a selection. That's where conversational AI fits in. Again, there has to be like a seamless escalation from the conversational AI, but you can, in a simple transaction, and simple is maybe the wrong word. In a transaction that doesn't require a lot of advice, you can lead a person to picking the right item through conversational AI. And so I think that as brands consider this, they need to consider like the price and the transaction value and the overall value of the customer's lifetime, and then decide what part of the customer journey makes sense and can be automated through AI, and what part needs to be handled by a human.
Yeah.
We talked a lot about the benefits of Quiq, the benefits of conversational AI, lots of digital channels, asynchronous design, and you touched a little bit on kind of the customer journey, but also the purchasing journey with things like carousels and things like that. I feel like Quiq isn't what people traditionally think of as a bot or a chat bot, and it's just gonna deflect calls or reduce my headcount needs, or maybe it'll upsell a little bit. I feel like it's more than that. You know, tell us a little bit about what you're doing, and maybe you could bring a company that uses your product today, but you don't have to say their name. You know, I would just want to highlight, like, what are businesses missing if they don't use your services and your tool set?
I mean, I'm going to give you a glib answer. I mean, they're just missing the boat. So that's what they're missing. They're missing out on delivering a great customer experience. And I mean, I can give you a couple of examples of businesses that we work with that do deliver some great customer experience. We're seeing some great results. Blue Nile, the online jewelry retailer, has done a great job implementing conversational AI to help people find items and select items. Another client that we work with is Overstock, and in the pandemic, everybody wanted to improve their house. Like the home goods industry was completely overwhelmed, and which was great for Overstock. But at the same time, they found that the number of agents they had to actually staff inquiries for human agents to staff inquiries were completely, like, the number of agents went down, the number of inquiries went up. Like it was the perfect storm for staffing a contact center and offering like reasonable response times. And so they were able to implement some bots to be able to reduce the traffic and the volume, and make sure that the simple stuff got handled by the conversational AI. So, I mean, I think going back to your question, what are the brands missing? Well, they're missing the opportunity to be more efficient. They're potentially, if it's an e-com journey, they're missing the opportunity to have increased revenue and conversions. But they're also missing the opportunity to improve their brand and their customer satisfaction. And so what I mean by that is we have clients who implemented the Quiq system and took agents that were previously on the phone, same agent, took them from the phone and put them on the messaging channel. And they saw the overall customer satisfaction increase from like 75% CSAT to like 90%, just by taking the same answers, the same level of service, and moving it to a more effective channel. And it just, if brands aren't doing asynchronous messaging and conversational AI, they're missing out on, it's kind of like, it's a lose-lose, because you're missing the opportunity to be more efficient, and you're missing the opportunity to have your customers be happier with a higher CSAT rating.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. What great explanation, and it was a good question. So we've got about a few minutes left before we wrap this up. So I wanted to ask, what's next for Quiq? What's on the horizon for 2022 and 2023 as you look forward to in this industry and where things are moving?
Yeah, it's so exciting. I mean, there's so much going on in the space. There's just so much momentum building and interest from brands. And the interest from brands is driven not just by like what we do in our sales and marketing outreach, but it's also driven by like the messaging channels themselves. Facebook just announced earlier this year opening Instagram for business messaging. WhatsApp is been opened. Apple and Google are continuing to advance their messaging platforms. So in the upcoming year, I think we're going to see some really interesting stuff coming from the messaging platforms themselves. I think we'll see the advancement of the conversational commerce, and see more brands actually implement that full journey from product selection through purchase. So conversational commerce is another thing that's coming. And then finally, we're spending a lot of time with our AI and machine learning and looking at parts of the system that we can make smarter. And so an obvious one is, well, how can we make agents more efficient? And so when a customer sends a message in, what can we do to automatically suggest to the agent a response? And that suggestion would be based upon how other agents responded to similar messages in the past. Or if we can't, with a high degree of certainty, determine exactly what the agent should say, well, maybe we can watch what the agent does and make their job easier. And so if the agent starts typing, and now it's clear where the agent's going, or the intent of their message, we can actually finish up their thought for them and not make them type out the whole thing. Like, for instance, the agent might say, you need to read our return policy, and they're getting to the point where they're going to paste in a URL. At the point in time that the agent says you need to read RET, like, we could be like, oh, the agent's going to suggest the return policy. Let me fill in the rest of that message. And so that's one example. We've got really a file folder full of other ideas where the fact that we have this platform where agents are working, we can learn from the agent behavior and apply that to conversational AI or to make other agents smarter.
Yep, I love that. And I know you guys already have quick reply buttons for the customers to be able to, instead of the customer having to type everything out, they just click a button like, thank you for your answer, or I don't need any more help, or whatever it is. But yeah, I use Gmail all the time, and I love that feature where I start typing and I just hit tab to finish the sentence. If you can do that on the agent side as well as the consumer side, it's almost like we're just getting a virtual assistant helping support us with the conversation. We just type shorthand. So Mike, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the podcast today. Quiq is just an amazing tool set. I've seen it in action. I've used it at companies I worked for in the past. I recommend it to a lot of the people that we talk to on the consulting front. But absolute pleasure having you on the podcast today.
Thank you, Artie. That was a sweet set of advice or recommendation you gave there. Thank you. It was a pleasure being here.
Thanks again. Appreciate it, Mike. Well, that wraps up the show for today. Thanks for joining, and don't forget to join us next week as we bring another guest in to talk about the trends around cloud contact center and customer experience. Also, you can find us at adleradvisors.com, LinkedIn, or your favorite podcast platform. We'll see you next week on another Cloud Podcast.